arrested, and it was his arrest there that sort of propelled him into a career in the law.
It's another thing that we noticed about as we said, the surviving members of the Greensboro Four.
February 1st, 2010, Civil Rights. At Woolworth, Greensboro, North Carolina, the sit-down. 4 black men walked into Woolworth and refused to leave their seats at the counter.
Pointed to the type of person it took to do this. You're no wallflower if you come in and make this kind of statement.
Well, David Richmond had a little more checkered career after this, partially because he's the only one who stayed in town, and he has said on many occasions that people didn't forget here. We move forward with something, but he was always thought of as that guy who changed everything. And that the others left town for great careers. Joseph McNeil was a 2-star Major General in the reserve for years, and of course Franklin McCain had this wonderful career as a chemist and in the chemical industry. But as you point out, you can't not just be a shrinking violet, but you had to have a great mind to do what they did. Because this wasn't just a happenstance, hey, I'm angry today, I'm going to sit down. They thought about this, and they thought about the position of not just how wrong that is, but how right we have to be. If we show any chink in our armor, then someone's going to use that to deflect attention.
Congressman Brad Miller, when he stopped by, said this had to be the result of the greatest bull session in college. 4 guys sitting around in a room saying, hey, what if, and you know how those conversations can take on these lofty things, we're going to change the world. That was one conversation. He said, even they couldn't have predicted where that would have taken them.
Right, most college freshmen are sitting around talking about what pretty girl they want to go date next.
Or music or something like that.
And these guys are talking about, as you say, changing the world in a way that was intricate and took a lot of forethought and all that type of stuff. But it seems so obvious now, looking back on how it will turn out, but they had no idea. And I kept referring to this morning as the spark that lit the fire that burned down the walls of segregation. And Greensboro and the Triad need to be very proud of that. Because, yes, you heard Senator Hagan talking about how over the course of months it was 8 states and 30 cities and tens of thousands of people. But it had to start with those 4 right here.
And started with young people, too. In a lot of the other protests, you had adults doing this, that, and the other. And and we saw this last election, you get young people fired up. There's an energy, and it evolves faster than really you can see.
And Franklin McCain said something very interesting, I thought. That was that older people to them were guys in their mid-20s. And they said they didn't want them as part of their movement because they felt before, that they were sort of complicit. They had lived with this and done nothing. And they said, therefore, we're the ones who are going to change it. And also, if you look at some of the older people, there's a February 11th Society you may have heard of. That's the High Point high school kids who went and did a sit-in at the Woolworths there. And many of their parents said, no, don't do this. They said, because it's our jobs on the line. Because they're going to fire us because of what you guys are doing. And yet there was another class, Joe Williams, who we spoke of earlier, the attorney and judge here in town. His father was a professor. And as Joe points out, some of the more professional older African Americans were pushing this. They were saying, I can't go sit in there, but you need to go do it.
When we spoke with Jim Schlosser, a longtime writer with the News and Record here in town, he said that they walked in, they stopped by to see Ralph Johns, businessman, and said, when we get arrested, you bail us out. They fully expected to be arrested. And they later admitted, they said it was almost to the credit of the Greensboro Police Department that they didn't. The manager said, I'm not going to swear out a warrant on them, but they walked in there figuring they were going to come out in handcuffs or something.
And we saw this in so many other cities around the South, didn't we? I mean, those are the iconic pictures from Alabama and places like that. And in Greensboro, it's hard to tell. I didn't know the people there. You never met them. But you have to think that there was a little, I don't know if I necessarily want to call it enlightened, but a better mindset here. The people who said, we've got to change this, and did.
It's a big statement about not only how people or police department, the community, and how the community reacted. It was not a popular thing when it happened. If you get a little, you get a little more perspective when something like this happens. But today we celebrate not only the 4, but the people who came after them and the people that helped.
And those are the most important ones. But there's interesting other people, and I love the story Franklin McCain tells about the little white lady who was at the end of the counter. You heard that one word? This woman was at the end of the counter, had this scowl on her face, and as they were doing the original sit-in, and she got up and came down towards them, and they were expecting some type of nasty thing to come out of her mouth like they were hearing from some other people, and she simply smiled and said, I'm so proud of you boys. You should have done this a long time ago, and they said that was kind of a lesson to them, that they too couldn't judge people just by how they look.
A lot of lessons learned, and a lot of those. It's interesting that during our coverage, the people, as you talk to them, hearing their perspective on the years, the way you looked at it a year or two later. We all mellow a bit with age, but you heard a lot of fire up there that, it's just as fresh today 50 years later.
Because, and President Obama talked about that during the campaign when, people were being critical not just of Jeremiah Wright, and that's certainly understandable with some of the things that Reverend Wright had said, but Barack Obama's point was you also have to understand that this is indelible on that generation, and that those type of scars never go away.
Well, thank you very much for your perspective, your insight. Of course, we're going to continue to cover what's going on down here. We've got a press conference inside. The first people actually walking through there. A lot of people, the general public here, still hanging around. They want to be a part of this. We've got a big crowd over here. Public tours will start a little later on. They got a lot of the honored guests are the first ones to walk through there. We'll continue to cover this end of it, and we'll be wrapping it up later on today at Net City.
All right, Brad, this has been a fascinating morning. Thank you so much for all that you've been doing out there. We look forward to hearing from you afterwards. Emily, weather again really, warmed up a little bit for the sun. Now it's gotten a little nicer.
Understand.
Well, it's a good thing we have this
We
right
must
now
keep
because
making
we'll start that
history. We
front
must
process.
keep doing it.
Until noon, though, we have winter weather advisories in effect.